We have a pretty vibrant audience out there with lots of expertise, and they bring their own level of enthusiasm and commitment. So when we introduced you, we showed a breadth of specialties that you explore. But let's start with the one that I think strikes me the most, and that's when you introduce this concept of genuine and authenticity in everything you do that will weave its way through all the program offerings that you present to the schools and organizations you work with. So talk to us about that, and then help us navigate through the wide range of different skill sets we need to be better in the lives that we lead.
Great. Thank you. And welcome to everybody here. I'm delighted that we're here. It's always great to be with youth servicing professionals and parents who are genuinely concerned with moving our country forward, moving the planet forward by really giving back to our greatest resource, which is our children, our students. And to address you specifically what you're just talking about, I look at this time in our lives as this opportunity to take this time, this period of problems and turn them into periods of possibilities. And one way I think we can do that is always getting back to our shared humanity, which is what is it that unites all of us, and that is our equal capacity for joy and our equal capacity for pain. And I think when we are putting together programs where we are acting as parents, correctional officers, mental health professionals, etc., I think it's when we approach this is to do this from a very responsive place and not a reactive or overreactive place, and by being our most genuine selves. I think this is what's going to get us through everything, is because there's so much hope in that, because we model that for our children. We gift ourselves that genuine ability to be our authentic selves. And I think everyone resonates with that. And I think when we all come together physically again, this is going to be ever more important. And I think it's really important, even while we're still Zooming with everybody. It's not the most optimum platform. I'm the first one to agree on that nothing's going to replace in-person, face-to-face connection. But it's what we've got, and I'm grateful that we have it. And for those of us that are first learning how to use it, I think we can get to this place where we have opportunities to present ourselves more genuinely than ever before, because we are like afraid to do that, right? We all have Zoom fatigue because we're constantly being aware of our pictures staring back at us. There's those delays. And it seems like, well, how vulnerable can you really be on this program? And I think those of us who've done telehealth with clients face-to-face, or someone like me who does a lot of group work with Zoom, is that if you set it up correctly, you can take it to very, very deep levels. But I think the level that we always want to get to is that we always have to make sure that we're being genuine. Our students, children in particular, are so adept at seeing how truly real are we, because they want to be real. I know we're always talking about the pandemic, but if we look what happened before the pandemic, we had high levels of anxiety, high level of depression, high levels of disconnection. And a part of that was because we weren't presenting our authentic selves. Those of us who work with middle school kids or high school children, students, can see that they're living this world of their social media platforms where they're rarely being their genuine self. So there's no misgivings to why they feeling so disconnected, because they become disconnected from their genuine selves. So I think that's the main place we want to lead, is we want to be genuine, to let our students know that this is how to be, even in this crazy little world. Let's be our genuine and our more authentic selves. Because I think then you can reflect on who you are and then move on your way to personal and professional excellence.
Which begs the question, how do we know when we're at our most authentic self? How do we know when we're expressing the real sense of genuineness in us? What would be the understanding criteria that allows us to say, boy, I am in that zone. I am authentic. I am genuine. How do we measure that? How do we determine that?
Well, I can only speak for myself, but I think it's a good framework for other people. It's to really kind of know yourself and know your body. Are you feeling anxious, or are you feeling grounded? Is there tension? Are your shoulders up? Are they down? Do you have a bunch of your insecurities floating around in your head? Am I being present? That's the big one. Am I so wrapped up in doing something as opposed to am I just being? And I think that's why it's really important to have self-awareness, because, you can go, and then okay, at this point then, if I'm feeling that center of grounded, and for me it's a physical sensation, it's a certain calm, it's a certain confidence, and I'm often generally really in tune with my personal compassion and compassion for other people, and so then I move from there. Now, if I am anxious and I am fearful or whatever those things, that's still me being genuine, but I'm aware of that, right? So it's like, let me make this very real. For all of us that have worked with kids, right? We've had that moment where you're thinking like, it's like, oh man, this is just driving me crazy, right? These kids are driving me crazy. And you're thinking that little, fill in the blank. But I use that as like, oh, I'm genuinely frustrated. But I don't want to get volatile. None of us want to be volatile. But I use that by being aware, and that's my cue. Oh, I'm thinking that little so-and-so. It's like, oh, my cue to go, okay, let me take myself to a more mindful place so that I can be there for myself and also for all these children that I'm responsible for. And I utilize that. Our emotions are the best place to stem our authentic self, because that's who we are. We are our emotions. And if we let go of like having negative or positive connotations and just say, this is just data. And therefore, then what I need to do when I have this data, instead of reacting to it, or sometimes we overreact to it, or we numb ourselves, I'm now going to respond to it. So when I talk about navigating relationships and how do you know, I'm in a moment where I'm being responsive and I'm not being reactive. And I think all of us as parents, all of us as youth servicing professionals or paraprofessionals get that. So once we can feel that, am I being reactive or am I being responsive? Then we know where we're at.
And we know which of those switches are on at any given time. If we're being reactive, then the switch of our feelings, our emotions are controlling the moment.
Yeah.
If we turn the switch on to being cognitive, to being thoughtful, to being present, then we know that switch of our thinking being is present and we have our strategies. When you're emotional, when that switch is on, you run out of options. You run out of options and you allow the emotions to control the situation. When you can switch to that thoughtful side of who we are and think that through, then we become much more strategic. And you're right, both of those are who we are at that time. It's being aware of who we are at that time. Am I being reactive or am I being responsive? And what an easy way of measuring that sense of authenticity and genuineness. Yes, you are authentic, you are genuine in that moment, but which is controlling your own destiny, and particularly with the young people that you're working with, or family and friends and colleagues, because these are all social relationships in that regard. So that becomes powerful. I want to take you down this other path very quickly, because in the work that we've been doing together with you for quite a while now, 15 plus years, we use healthy play as an experience to deal with all kinds of social emotional learning. We do it through play. And one of the most natural ways of learning, as you kind of shared with us over the years, and you said something in one of the presentations that we co-ventured, that when you're at play, you are really at your most authentic self. And I watched that. I watched that from the side. I played in those games with you. And the opportunity to watch people and play, it exposes a side of them that sometimes our adult life restricts us from showing. And that's what you would call being your most authentic, genuine self. Talk to us a little bit about that play and how that kind of takes off some of those shields we carry around with us.
This is one reason why I use play, and I'm fortunate. I get to work with kids pre-K all the way up through grad school, right? And I use play all the time because play really gets at our most genuine selves. And more importantly, play really is the place where we learn executive function skills, right? How do we think? How do we organize our thoughts? How do we build empathy? How do we problem solve? And so I'm always utilizing play for that. And it's fascinating how quickly our authentic selves come out. And play is like the metaphor for life. It's what I notice is if somebody cheats when they're playing or is dishonest while they're playing, in real life they tend to be that way. But getting them to be self-examining that is really difficult, especially when they're a very young child because they don't have abstract thinking. But it's like you can kind of like point it out to them, or they can experience it, and then you've got something to work with. I loved when I was working as the youth services coordinator at Palo Verde Hospital. Before a parent could admit one of their kids to the unit, one of the things we said is we have a mandatory fun night. You got to come. I know it sounds kind of crazy, mandatory fun, but it was often the place where the parents and the kids actually first started interacting with each other, because it was just play, but yet it was a place for them to find some joy with each other, to find some success, to do all these kind of cooperations. And then we were able to bring that all back into their interpersonal relationships and use that as a place of strength. And that's what I love about healthy play as well, is within a few moments of playing with a child, I can almost read any child. And I think teachers can see that as well. Children at a very young age really learn how to guard themselves and how to protect themselves. But when they feel safe in play, their genuine selves come out. So it's like them almost amplified. And so you can actually have something that you can use. And it's a beautiful thing to watch. And it works with every single age group. And that's why I'm always looking for ways that we can engage with socially. But how can we do this playfully? Because when we talk about what's our shared humanity, we have the same equal capacity for pain and the same equal capacity for joy. All of us, that's what unites us. And especially when we're in crisis, instead of dealing with the pain all the time, can we come from a joyous place? And that's what I've always loved about the beautiful nature of play.
And when you talk about play, you also use the word fun. And when you talk about fun, and play together, you connect the two, because the question that you would ask is what's the number one purpose of play? And the number one purpose of play is
to have fun. And the most important part of the game are the people. So
are the people.
Yeah, so to me, it's like fun will forge cooperation quicker than any other human dynamic other than a catastrophe. In catastrophes, boy, we come together, but I'd rather live my life more in play and fun than I would catastrophe. And then, but I got to use it as a tool where we can get some cooperation. And the other thing that I do love about when we're having fun with other people and when kids can see the score is important, but it's not as important as the people playing the game. Is it the thing that I've always loved about play is how it bonds children to caring adults really quickly. And that's what I've always loved about Kids at Hope. You know, kids succeed when they're bonded with a caring adult. And I almost know no faster way of doing that. My experiences for a lot of decades, I'm old, has been the fastest way to do that is by having real, genuine, healthy play with the child. And it doesn't matter what age they are. I mean, I work with preschool kids. I work with elementary school kids. You've watched me manage 150 kids at a time travel summit. I do it with high school kids. I'm doing it with the varsity athletes at the University of Arizona from time to time. And I do it in corporations with CEOs and executives. And play just creates that natural dynamic, if we feel safe, to be our most genuine, vulnerable selves. And when we're self-aware, then we kind of can sit in with who we are and then what do we want. And when you talk about then, okay, now we can then reflect upon those 4 destinations for Kids at Hope, right? But we got to get to that place, and sometimes that's the challenge. So we can't always go up and say, okay, you know, let's just go to the 4 destinations. One has to be able to reflect upon oneself to do that. And for younger kids who don't have abstract thinking, we have to approach them in different manners. So we do it in a linear or a more concrete way of doing it. But
so one of the areas that Spencer has helped us understand in terms of engaging young people with caring adults is to use play in a way that maybe we haven't thought of before. That play is the most natural way to learn, and we use it quite effectively between 0 and 5. Everything is really about play, or should be about play. Between 0 and 5, and how much of the brain is developing through this process called play. And it's worked so well, we stopped doing it once we enter the formal educational institution. We put play on the back burner and then put the academic cognitive development on the front burner, when in fact they should be on the same burner. But one of the curious ways or remarkable ways we've used Spencer's work in terms of integrating it with Kids at Hope, and particularly time travel, is in the old way, we thought, our research tells us that hope is taught and learned. You teach hope like you teach any other skill. One of those skills in learning about hope is time travel, how you can help the brain process its ability to think positively about its future and come up with plans to achieve the goals that the brain has established, come up with plans, and then find the energy necessary to pursue those. So the first few time traveler summits, when we were teaching this powerful expression of mental time travel, we would do it in the traditional way. We would have kids in classrooms. We would bring in a speaker that would talk about their careers, talk about their path through education, how they had to prepare for the challenges of adulthood. We tried to do it all at the cognitive level, right? And leaving the emotion out of it. We didn't think that was going too well. So we sat down with Spencer and we said, let's merge healthy play with mental time travel. And now we bring about 150 middle school kids together for 3/4 of a day, and they go through a series of play activities, just having fun, and then connect it with each of the 4 destinations in life. And by doing that, we're rewiring their brain to be hopeful. We took advantage of what we understood academically and through the research, and finally found a way to actually practice it. So it works, and we've seen the change in the kids' attitudes in the Time Traveler Summit, their sense of enthusiasm, the amount of fun and engagement, rather than sit there and listen to someone talk about, what it took to become an accountant, or what it took to start their family, or how they give back to their community. We do this through this natural process called play. Hey, Spencer, I want to take you into another area because we only have an
Sure.
hour together. And I want to take you into this area that we talk a lot about, but I don't think we really have understood its true implications, and how we can actually define it and use it in terms of being that whole human being. And that is this concept of empathy. Talk to us a little bit about empathy and how that is taught, and why it's so important in our lives as human beings.
Well, empathy is remarkable, and it's one of those things that we can see we really need to develop at younger ages. As I sit on the fictitious and non-fictitious council of all things bad when it comes to student behaviors at the University of Arizona, like I sit on the substance abuse team, on the sexual assault prevention council, anti-hazing councils. But really what I see is one of the main problems that I see that is related to all those bad behaviors is that these students lack empathy. Because if we have empathy towards other people, we are less likely to harm another person. But where do we develop empathy? How does that come about? Once again, it gets back to play. So for those of us that are working with anyone that's probably 26 years of age or younger, those kids very rarely have gone outside and played like we did in our neighborhoods. And why is that important? And why is it important for empathy? Because it's those play years that we get just pre-K up to K1 or 2nd grade, where we develop executive function skills. So the same students that I have that are 18, 19 years old that are doing all these horrendous things is they're lacking in executive function skills. And we've had great success when we can bring that back. So instead of talking about these social norming things that are good, we go back to how do we build empathy? And then we see the problem behaviors disappear. But when we play, we have those executive function skills. And what do I mean by that? Is that's where we learn to organize our thinking, how we think, how we develop empathy, how do we problem solve, senses of fairness. So that's why we want to recapture that. And here's why it's important. There's a MIT professor named Sherry Turkle, and she compiles all the metadata related to relationships and technology. And I think we're all kind of in agreement that some of our technology has reduced our relationship capabilities. She specifically studies relationships, technology, and college students. And here's what she's discovered from the last 20 years. In the last 20 years, our college students have become 40% less empathetic. And therefore, it's not surprising to me that I see it as I work in higher ed, more and more of these larger kind of problems. And where does that come from? Well, a lot of it comes from is because we have our technology and we just haven't figured out the balance. I'm pro technology, but there's got to be a balance there. So there's technology, and then there's the social media platforms where it takes us from our genuine self. And as we're doing that, we have less empathy for ourselves and less empathy for other people. So it's that empathy that I always go back to, and that's where we have in Healthy Play, we use that rule number 1, because Healthy Play is not just about improving everyone's physical health. That's great, and it'll do that. But, we talk about what are the social emotional needs that we want. So Healthy Play has that rule number 1, our empathy rule, and it goes like this. Rule number 1 is whoever is closest to the injured person, and we know it's most often the perpetrator, has to stop and stay with that kiddo until that kiddo feels better. So we change the dynamic and we bring this in. And so what we've been able to see with Healthy Play, the more and more we build empathy into our students, the more compassionate they are to themselves and each other. And then principals are saying, we have seen our behavior referrals from the playground and throughout the day go down by 50%. And then teachers are saying, wow, when the students seem to be empathetic to each other, our 5-year data on healthy play says that teachers experience a 70% reduction in behavior problems. If I asked any parent, any probation officer, any teacher, would you like 70% fewer behavior problems? Raise your hand. Most of them go up. And a lot of that, how we do that is by building empathy. And when I do my relationships program, that's one of the 3 central concepts that we use.
So what strikes me in what you're talking about is whether you're talking about bullying and you have a bullying prevention program, or you're talking about social relationships, or you're talking about social emotional learning, right? Or you talk about hazing, whatever it is in terms of relationship struggles and issues we have, it comes back to this core concept of empathy, right? And even
Absolutely.
your connection between being empathetic and its relationship to cognitive function. So I know you've done a great job in this regard, and sometimes we may not have a clear definition of what empathy looks like and what empathy doesn't look like. And I'm trying to remember the film that you showed us in one of our workshops. But talk to us a little bit about what empathy really is and why sometimes we misrepresent what we think empathy is, but it's not really being empathetic.
Yeah, that's an important one, because I think a lot of times Brene Brown is excellent at this, and she really talks about the difference between empathy and sympathy. Empathy is that where you are, as much as humanly possible, you're tapped into what another person might feel like and experience. And why that's sometimes hard to do is because that means you've got to tap into something that's maybe challenging for you to feel. If somebody's really, let's say, someone just got a divorce, and it's like, whoa, if I want to tap into my empathy, it takes me to a place viscerally, emotionally, cognitively, that's like that. So I've got to sit within me. But once again, it's about the other person, right? So if I want to be for the other person, I can't be trapped in what's going on with me. I want to be there for them. Now, so that means, and I talk about this in my relationships program, is that we then have to become comfortable with our uncomfortable feelings. So I've got to be responsive. I got to reflect what's going on here, feel what I need to feel so I can calm that, be comfortable, so then I can attend to another person. What we tend to do is, instead of being empathetic, we tend to be sympathetic, which is a compassionate act. It's compassionate, may not be exactly what the other person needs, and I do believe intentions matter, but sympathy, you're not quite as comfortable hanging with that uncomfortable feeling that this other person's projecting. And so you try to fix it, right? Someone might say, oh, my youngest kid is just being kicked out of school, and because you're uncomfortable, you're trying to look for the silver lining. You say, yeah, but your other kid is doing really well. Perfect example of this, I'll be vulnerable, I'll use myself and my wife. So Joni's a school counselor, K-6, 1,000 kids, and she's a counselor. And some days she has some pretty horrendous days, right, Rick? She's doing, 504s, there might be a mandatory reporting, and maybe this is a day where, the principal's wants her to do more stuff, and she comes home and she starts telling me all what's going on, and I can tell she needs something from me. And where do I go? I'm socialized male, so I kind of want to fix everything. So I'm telling her all the things that, she should do. And she'll say, Spencer, I'm a grown-ass woman. I don't need you to take care of me. I just need you to be here with me. And it's like, oh, that's right. I'm uncomfortable that my wife is hurting and I'm trying to fix it. But really what she needs is for me to be present. So empathetic means we touch on that feeling. And sometimes we don't even have the words to say, but I think that alone would be enough. Just say, hey, I don't know what to say, but I really want to be there for you. What can I do? Is there anything I can do, or do you just need me to just listen? And sometimes just listening is enough.
Yeah, I think often we want to project our own feelings, what we've experienced, so that they can understand we're being empathetic. But once we project our own feelings into someone else's experience, we're not being empathetic, we're being sympathetic, okay?
Exactly.
So what they need is empathy. So if you've just had a difficult relationship with a boss, with a coworker, with a student, with a parent, whoever it is, and I'm sharing that with you, and you come back and say to me, well, you know, Rick, I know exactly how you're feeling because 2 weeks ago, I had that same situation with my boss, with a parent, with a student, and now I'm not being empathetic, I'm being sympathetic, and what you need is me to be empathetic. And
Yeah.
there's where we kind of fog up the understanding of the two. And the Dalai Lama says it best, but without definition. And I really appreciate you bringing clear definition between the two and why one is much more powerful, well, not much more powerful, but much more needed at a time than sympathy, empathy. But Dalai Lama describes empathy as the supreme human emotion. And once you understand the differentiation of what you just talked about, you could understand why he would call it the supreme human emotion, because it's tough to get there. It's tough to really get into what someone else is feeling and allow them to be who they are without you offering any other information to fix it, to identify with it, whatever it may be. And boy, once we master, understand, I would say would be a better word than master, but understand the difference between empathy and sympathy, we will be better human beings to each other.
Yeah, I think it's all about putting attention to the intention of what we're doing so that we can be responsive and not be reflective. So it can be about the other person and not you. That's why I'm so excited to be doing a little bit more of the relationships programming with you, because we're asking all of us to do something that we weren't taught how to do. You know, we can all recall who taught us how to do math, who taught us how to drive a car, but no one's even sat us down and said, this is how we do relationships. Now, play will get at some of that stuff for sure, and that's a great foundation, but I love that almost all the programming I do and what I really see the intention behind Kids at Hope is it's all about having healthy relationships. And I'm glad we're coming up with more simplified ways of teaching people how to do that so we can navigate it, so we can navigate the difference between being sympathetic and being empathetic as one of those key things that we could do.
Absolutely. Hey, Spencer, before we're going to go into Q&A in a couple minutes, but I know one of the issues that gets a disproportionate amount of attention from time to time, especially when it becomes an issue, whether it be called hazing in the university system or called bullying in the pre-K through high school system. It's really one and the same, isn't it? Hazing and bullying, it's kind of power control.
It is. It's the grown-up version.
Yeah, it's a grown-up version of bullying, right? We now call it hazing. But in your workshops and presentations, and again, we have a short period of time, are there one or two or three quick down and dirty rules that you can share with us, or ideas you can share with us to deal with those, or at least begin to think about those maybe with a different mindset?
Yeah, and I think it really depends on what age group that you're dealing with. Once again, for younger kids, teaching empathy, practicing empathy, cooperation, learning how to be cooperative amongst competition. I'm one of the few programs that I believe in competition, but it can't be at anyone else's expense. So how do we become the best we can be? So I think we can do that. I think what I've learned working with hazing, and particularly with groups, I'm going to put it out loud there, with fraternities and sororities, where we see most of that at the University of Arizona, is to identify, well, why are we doing that? And how can we dehumanize another person? Because that's really what's going on, whether someone's in elementary school, middle school, or in college, or even older, is hazing, bullying. It's all about dehumanizing another person. Once again, this is why empathy building is really important. One of the things that I've had some great success with older students who get involved with hazing, because it's it's this ritualistic way of kind of bonding us together. It's kind of a disturbing way of doing it. Gangs do that. They have these rituals that make you become part of the group. What we've tried to do is figure out, how do you create a sense of belonging without having to humiliate? So I often say what we're trying to do is learn how to celebrate, not humiliate. I know it makes me sound like Jesse Jackson, but that's what we really get to. How do we create rituals that do bond? Because that's what we're looking for. And I think, how do junior members become senior members? Can we do that in a non-dehumanizing way? Now, of course, children, and as they get older, are always looking for more exciting ways to do that. That's why things get a little bit hairier as people get older. So you got to find ways that will make that happen. So for example, we have a game that I use with elementary school kids that is a dodgeball game, believe it or not, that teaches how not to bully. It teaches how to be respectful, which blows people's mind because it's a dodgeball game, and most dodgeball games are great for the kids with lightning reflexes and cannon arms, but it's horrible for everyone else. But we changed the dynamics, right? Where, it's called Dragons Dodgeball, and there's pairs of kids in the middle of the circle. And, and the only target that you can hit with a softer ball is the tush of the Dragon's dodgeball. The dragon. And then if you hit that tush, you've got to come in, and then you're now the new target for, and the person that was the butt becomes the head, and then the head goes back into the circle. So it's always rotating. And so what you kind of learn is, why would I throw really hard to hurt somebody, especially if I'm going to be the next target? So you learn like executive function skills. Oh, my challenge is to just throw the ball to tag somebody, not to hurt somebody. And then you start seeing people as the people. That's why that's the second most important part of the game, second most important poster. The most important part of the game are the people. And you start seeing that, oh, this is the way that we humanize everyone. The most important part of anything when we're playing are the people. That transfers throughout the day. Most important part of anyone in this school are the people. And so when I'm doing this with college students, we do the same thing, sometimes take them through the same activities, where they learn, oh, this is my way of practicing empathy, compassion, creating an activity that has the same kind of excitement that bonds us, because we just bonded with each other through fun, as opposed to humiliating, hurting somebody, or doing something horrible. And it's really wonderful in terms of the enlightenment. So I've watched students go, like, this is a fraternity, so where we have some of our problems, where a lot of these guys can go, we really are now having to think about the values that we operate under. And they always talk about like this positive value of loyalty. And I said, well, let's explore that. And so when we explored it, we've discovered that a lot of these guys were loyal to their organization, but not respectful of the individuals in that, or not respectful for their guests. And so they had to come up with a new value that made better sense, and that was honor. And it was just amazing to watch them move that way. And once again, a game activity, a facilitated dialogue is what led it to that place. So they are, oh, I'm sorry, didn't mean to interrupt.
No, I'm going to say we're going to run out of time, and I want to open up for some Q&A, but I just want to underscore this idea of the most important part of play, or first part is why do we play? To have fun. What's the most important part of play? Are the people, and I think we can use that in terms of education and juvenile justice, although it seems counterintuitive to think about play in the juvenile justice system or the child welfare system. But when you really use your imagination and think about it, what you're talking about is learning, yes. And we're talking about a genuine way of learning. But I can talk about this with you for hours and hours and hours, but Kim, let's open up for Q&A, because I know there's a ton of questions out there about some of the subject matters Charlie touched on.
Oh, Spencer. That's okay.
Spencer still touched on.
That's all right. We still think of my great business partner, Charlie. We miss him.
We think of our old friend and miss him. Kim?
Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for shooting your questions over. There's a bunch in there, and we'll get to as many as we can. Again, we have almost 330 participants, and everybody has lots of good questions. So Robert had a question. He was the first one to shoot one out, so I thought I'll highlight him first. He says, what's the best type of curriculum to teach social emotional coping strategies to help students who may be in a juvenile detention center?
I would go, it's hard for me to call healthy play a curriculum because I don't tell people, you know, here's what you need to do on a Friday and here's this class. It's really a 4-point concept. We play to have fun. People are the most important part of the game. If someone gets hurt physically or emotionally, whoever is closest stays with them. And then we have a problem-solving rule where people leave the game. But I would utilize it as a foundational piece. It serves a bunch of purposes. It serves meeting the needs of kids physically. We know that children and teenagers need about an hour of physical activity a day. But then it really meets the needs of the kids socially and emotionally. I know sometimes people will look at healthy play and go, oh, it's games, it's frivolous. But games, I hope if you're listening to me, are the most powerful thing. If we want to talk about a solid foundation to a healthy social emotional life, we need to make sure kids are playing. And really, they're not playing, like I said, if you're working with anyone 26 years of age or younger, they aren't going out to play. So let's get them to play. You get the book, Learning to Play, Playing to Learn. You can get it through Kids at Hope, their website or my website. And that'll, make it happen. I can come out and do some trainings as well. But it'll give you the foundational piece. And then there's not so much curriculum based, but we talk about a logical and practical continuum of games. And we start off with the concept of creative play. And creative play says all games are made up. There's really 6 games in the world, and everything's a version of that. So you can change any aspect of the game to meet the needs of your children, your students, emotionally, socially, physically, behaviorally. And then we talk about moving on to compassionate play or trust play, where you help build creative communities by bonding people with the caring adults and each other. Very Kids at Hope. I hope you're really hearing this, through play. And then at the end, we finally move to soft aggression activities. And those of you who work with middle school students, those of you who work with high school students, they love this part because they're really exciting games. But what's great about the soft aggression activities is you now have built a foundation of trust and compassion that you can move on to these activities where you can actually cathartic some of those more aggressive energies that are out there. We've done it backwards all the time in our school settings. We give the kids a bunch of hard rubberized balls and they go out and play dodgeball, and most of the kids are bruised and you're filling out incident reports and none of the kids are happening, and all they've learned is might equals right. But if you want to build a sense of belonging and caring, you really do this practical continuum of game activities. So that's kind of what I would talk about if you were using healthy play.
Yeah. So we're going to have to shorten our answers a little bit so we get more questions in.
Okay, sorry.
I have to learn that particular skill set too. Kim, please.
Sure. Our friend Trish up in Washington. Hi, Trish.
Hi, Trish.
Our staff has been working on filling our own cups so they can overflow. Do you have suggestions for how the adults can develop their own sense of empathy so that it flows into our relationships with families and students?
Absolutely. One way is play with each other. The other is to look at our relationships and how we do them. I think it's important just to be mindful about being empathetic. And I think one of the places it starts very simply is every day wake up and think about gratitude. And gratitude will really make you feel hopeful. It will really make you feel connected, and it opens you up to empathy. Yeah, pretty good. Shorten that one up there.
Yeah, you're doing much better. We talked a little bit about in a previous Hope Forum the difference between your to-do list, which we all have, and your to-be list, right? And who are you being while you're doing, right? And that's authenticity and genuineness and being in the present. But let's add to that this gratitude list, right? If you can put together a list of things that you do, you can equally put together a list of things that you're grateful for. And when you do that, the brain uses that information as nutrients to create a sense of positiveness, and equal to that, a sense of hopefulness. So I don't want to lose the track of the power of that idea of having a gratitude journal of some nature. It just becomes part of, eating well is thinking well. So if you eat well, you exercise well, you have to think well, and that becomes the wholeness of it. Kim, back to you.
Can I just add one more thing? Is we do have an activity in Healthy Play called personality, and a lot of staff, when they do their staff meetings, start off with a round of personality, and it totally builds empathy. So it's a great one to take back to your families.
Yeah, I saw one question pop up about talk a little bit more about the connection between empathy and cognitive ability. And I think that those dots connect very quickly when you think back about what the Dalai Lama said, that empathy is the supreme human emotion. When you understand that, and you understand what distinguishes us from all the other species on Earth, one is our cognitive abilities. We have a greater breadth of thinking. And if you include in that the intentionality of empathy as one of those cognitive abilities, then you can see the direct connection. Again, any of these subject matters we can talk about for hours because they're so interesting and so fascinating to explore. Kim?
Yes. Just want to let you know, Spencer, that Stacy says that your answers are perfect and very on point.
Oh, thank you, Stacy.
Hey, Kim,
I appreciate that.
Don't ask Stacy what she thinks about me, okay? So let's leave that off. Don't allow her to respond to that.
We love you.
Carmen is asking, how do you assist someone to find their authentic self, that they don't let go and show those child behaviors?
I think how we model on this planet, to each other, I think really speaks volumes. Sometimes we as parents, sometimes as health professionals, we sometimes feel that our students, each other, no one's listening. But it's been my experience, we really have a lot of people that get back, and they'll come up to you sometimes later and say, when you said this or when you did this, I was paying attention. So I think how we model is really important. I think showing patience. And I think, once again, it's that relationship thing, having a genuine conversation. And sometimes we don't have to start with like, why are you not being this way? It could be like, let's just talk about this. Because generally speaking, people aren't being their most authentic self because they haven't been taught how to do that. And also they're waiting to know if you are a safe person. Are you going to be one of the people that I can trust? So I think that those are some quick answers. Once again, we could probably have many more of these conversations, and I would love to be welcomed back, and we can talk deeper on a lot of these.
Yeah. I think the opportunity for kids to see us in different roles. One of the things that a lot of teachers and youth workers and probation officers talk about is when they see that kid in the grocery store, and that kid comes running out, Mr. Smith, Mr. Barbella, Dr. Barbella, I didn't know you shopped here, right? And they're basically saying, I didn't know you were really a genuine human being. I thought you were just a principal or a teacher or a probation officer. And so they see them in a different environment. And I think the idea of play being a genuine environment in which to express yourself, allowing the kids that you serve to see you play, right? To have fun with your colleagues. And role modeling is such a great teacher in its own right? It's not being a sage on the stage, it's being the guide on the side. And part of that is letting kids see you in your true authentic self, and maybe offering play as an example of how kids can watch you in terms of some of these activities that you outlined. Kim?
This was really, I'm going to make just a quick little tag on there. Joni and I had the great opportunity to work in Paradise, California after those horrendous fires there. In last March and May, and I'm telling you, you talk about a traumatized area, and yet it was the amount of joy that was rekindled through play and through genuine conversations, because people had to become their most authentic self to kind of get through this, but to see that they could do it in a playful manner or a manner where we could actually connect, that was just a validating way of how being genuine, being present, listening, but communally having conversations and playing, how important it was, not just for the students, but for the adults as well.
The idea of understanding authenticity, genuineness, and all empathy through the cognitive side, through the lecture side, through the presentation side, and then actually experiencing it directly, the feeling side of it, connecting the both emotional and the cognitive makes us that much stronger. Kim, I think we're good for maybe one good tough question for Spencer.
Hey, I'm not sure it's tough as much as maybe not everybody has seen Spencer or been in his presence as much as we have, and a lot of our treasure hunters out there. So they're saying you're mentioning healthy play a lot, which we of course know what that means. But what's the difference? Like, what's unhealthy play? How would you?
Okay. Yeah, healthy play, unhealthy play is like unhealthy relationships, right? So is there manipulation going on? Is there control? Is there violence? Is there volatility? Is there those are the big ones there, mostly. Is there meanness? Is there
Frustration.
Oh, you know, you can go on. So whatever looks like in an unhealthy relationship, you'll see that in unhealthy play as well. So some people say, well, we're letting our kids play, but if you go out there, you'd be surprised how unhealthy it is. The University of Miami says on a typical elementary school playground, within a 20-minute period, there are over 220 acts, mini aggressions to full aggressions, that we see, in a 20-minute period. So, and we sometimes think, okay, that's great, they're playing, but if you go out there, a lot of them aren't, because a lot of them haven't been taught how to play.
Yeah. So I want to thank you, Spencer, for walking us through so many different thoughts and ideas and expressions. Hopefully this feeds our interest. Your book, Learning to Play, Playing to Learn, is a remarkable handbook of lots of good information. Hopefully our book, The Soul Science and Culture of Hope, is an equal companion piece that plays against each other and supports each other's content and thoughts. We want to thank you. I hope to bring Spencer back. We're going to figure out different ways to go beyond the forums into workshops and deeper understandings, more activities, more Q&A, the expressions of the topics that we've been able to do. We're thinking more about that. We're introducing our first one to that effect. If you have interest in attending others that you think would be helpful for Kids at Hope to organize with Spencer, with Dr. Faye Mandel, with Dr. Robert Maurer, or with some of the other people that we've had, please let us know. We need that information to help us navigate what it is that we can do on your behalf. We have our own ideas, but your ideas will enrich those. Next week, we have Dr. Scott Seaman, who's the executive director of the Association of Washington School Principals. And Scott is an advocate, a proponent, a student of Hope culture, and he's using that to navigate his association. And he has a consortium of states around the country that are adopting Hope as a strategy to help navigate some of the educational issues that you're experiencing. So don't miss Scott next week. Spencer, from the bottom of our collective hearts, thank you for taking this time. We'll be in touch with you as we always have been and will always will be. And to each and every one of you, don't forget to fasten your seatbelt. You're traveling at the speed of hope. Good day, and God bless all of you. Take good care. Bye-bye.
you.